Breaking news, Philadelphia sheriff calling ICE agents fake wannabe law enforcement and warning, quote, "You don't want this smoke." And her comments are generating a lot of headlines and some outrage. One Republican is now calling for her arrest. Well, let's tell you exactly what she said. Here's more from Sheriff Rochelle Bilal.
I call them made-up, fake, wannabe law enforcement, because what they do is against not only legal law, but the moral law. If any of them want to come in this city and commit a crime, you will not be able to hide. Nobody will wish you off. You don't want this smoke, because we will bring it to you. The criminal in the White House would not be able to keep you from going to jail.
And she is out front now, the sheriff for the city and county of Philadelphia, Rochelle Bilal. And Sheriff, I am grateful for your time tonight. So obviously you used those words knowing full well they would be heard, and you were prepared for them to be heard, as they have been. Why did you feel the need to speak out as a law enforcement officer so passionately against ICE?
Hello, crew. Adam is here. There is a moment happening in cities across America that the corporate media refuses to call what it actually is. Law enforcement officials, the very people sworn to protect and serve, are standing up and telling the truth about what the Trump administration has unleashed on American streets. And it is not the kind of truth you hear in carefully crafted press releases or sanitized official statements. It is raw. It is direct.
Let me be clear. If any law enforcement agent, any ICE agent, is going to come to Philly to commit crimes, then you can get the F out of here. Because if you do that here, I will charge you with those crimes. You will be arrested. You will stand trial. You will be convicted, whether it's in state or federal court. It's my office prosecuting it. That's how the law works. And you will do your time, because Donald Trump cannot pardon you for a state court conviction. Do you hear me, ICE agents? Do you hear me, National Guard? Do you hear me, military? You're going to jail if you commit crimes in the city of Philadelphia. You will be accountable. The law applies to all of you. And I know that there are honest, decent, moral law enforcement officers out there by the bushel, including in ICE. This is not for you. This is for any one of your colleagues who thinks they are above the law.
It is the moral clarity of people who have spent their careers in law enforcement watching their profession be turned into a weapon against the very communities they swore to protect. Philadelphia's Sheriff Rochelle Bilal said it in terms that leave no room for interpretation. If you do this in Philly, we're going to arrest you. You come here with your masks and you start harassing our people, you will be placed under arrest, you will be prosecuted.
So I'm with the DA, and we will work with them. If any of them want to come in this city and commit a crime, you will not be able to hide. Nobody will wish you off. You don't want this smoke, because we will bring it to you. And the fake, whatever they call them, because I can't say the name, but the criminal in the White House would not be able to keep you from going to jail. Renee Good should be here today. And to her family, we are saying law enforcement professionals are not the ones here in this city that would do that. But here's the last thing that I will say.
That is a law enforcement official drawing a line in the sand and telling the Trump administration's paramilitary forces that they are not welcome in her city. And under her leadership, alongside District Attorney Larry Krasner, homicides in Philadelphia dropped to their lowest level in 60 years. 60 years.
While attending the DA Krasner press conference on dealing with the situation with Ms. Good that happened in Minneapolis, what was stated was that the district attorney said if you're going to come in Philadelphia and commit a crime, that he would arrest you. The sheriff's office, it deals with transportation. So basically I said you would not be able to hide, Nobody will whisk you away. And if he charges you, then you can be arrested. What I was saying is that when I said, you come in this city to do a crime, we will bring the smoke to you. People are tired of these people coming into the city, masked up, basically all masked up, and pulling people out and causing havoc.
The same city that national media loves to portray as a crime-ridden hellscape just achieved its lowest homicide rate in 6 decades under leaders who are now standing up to federal overreach. That is not a coincidence. That is what competent, principled law enforcement looks like when it is focused on protecting communities rather than terrorizing them. The murder of Renee Good brought this confrontation into sharp focus. A United States citizen, a mother, a woman going about her life, was shot and killed in cold blood by an ICE agent. The video is out. The world has seen it. She was trying to get away from a goon who screamed at her to get out of the car and then shot her through the window. That is not law enforcement. That is not public safety. That is execution without trial, without due process, without any of the protections the Constitution guarantees to every American citizen. And what did the President of the United States say about this murder? He said she behaved horribly, and then she ran him over. The video shows no such thing. There is no evidence she ran anyone over. There is no evidence she did anything except try to escape a violent encounter with a federal agent who had no legal authority to terrorize her. But Trump looked at the footage of a woman being murdered and invented a justification for her killing. That is the moral vacuum at the center of this administration. That is the banality of evil playing out in real time on the national stage. Congresswoman Sydney Kamlager-Dove has been speaking with the kind of moral clarity that has become chic in Washington. She looks at what is happening and calls it what it is. ICE agents acting as judge, jury, and executioner. Federal law enforcement transformed into paramilitary groups terrorizing American communities. A president who pardons January 6th insurrectionists while allowing his own agents to murder citizens without accountability. The hypocrisy is staggering, and it is documented. January 6th, defendants who attacked Capitol Police with bear spray and poles and bludgeons received due process. They were charged, tried, and many were convicted. And then they received pardons from Donald Trump. Dozens of them have gone on to commit additional crimes. Meanwhile, Renee Good, a citizen who committed no crime, who was going about her life, who was shot through a car window by a federal agent, is labeled a domestic terrorist by the administration before the video even came out. And now that the video is out and shows she did nothing to justify lethal force, the administration's response is silence and deflection. Kristi Noem needs to resign. She should be impeached. Those are not radical statements. Those are the conclusions anyone reaches when they look at what is happening under her watch. ICE agents are operating with what the vice president has described as absolute immunity, a claim that is legally and morally untrue. They are receiving training that no one has examined or verified. They are being sent into communities with the message that they can act with impunity, that there will be no consequences for whatever they do, and the result is exactly what we saw in Philadelphia. A citizen murdered, a family destroyed, a community terrorized, and a president who looks at the footage and blames the victim. Local law enforcement is being forced to clean up the mess. Sheriff Bilal understands this. She knows that when federal agents come into her city wearing masks and harassing people, it is her officers who will have to deal with the consequences. It is her department that will lose the trust of the communities they have spent years building relationships with. It is her city that will suffer when people are afraid to call police because they cannot tell the difference between a local officer and a federal paramilitary agent. That is why her warning was so direct and so necessary. You come here with your masks and start harassing our people, you will be placed under arrest. You will be prosecuted. That is not defiance of federal authority. That is the defense of local communities against an administration that has abandoned any pretense of lawful governance. Congresswoman Kamlager-Dove pointed to something essential in the Judiciary Committee hearing yesterday. Republicans on the dais looked at the Renee Good video and said, "You know what this shows me? that if you don't comply, you will die. Multiple Republicans said this out loud in a congressional hearing. They looked at footage of a woman being murdered by a federal agent, and their takeaway was that citizens need to comply more, need to submit more, need to accept whatever violence is directed at them without resistance. Kamlager-Dove asked the question that should be on every American's mind. Would you be saying that if this person was in your district, if this was your constituent, someone who attends the church where you worship, would you be sitting there calmly explaining that non-compliance justifies murder? The answer is obvious. They would not. They would be demanding investigations and accountability and justice. But because Renee Good was not their constituent, because she was just another name in another place, they felt comfortable justifying her killing. The January 6th comparison is devastating because it is exact. Those who attacked police officers, who breached the Capitol, who threatened the peaceful transfer of power, were given due process. They were charged and tried, and then they were pardoned by a president who calls them patriots. Meanwhile, Renee Good, who did nothing except try to escape a violent encounter, is dead and her killer faces no consequences. The duplicity is not subtle, it is not hidden, it is playing out in full view of the American public, and the administration seems to believe that no one will notice or that no one will care. Where do we go from here? Congresswoman Kamlager-Dove laid out the path forward. Keep doing what we are doing so that the fever breaks. The fever of authoritarianism, the fever of lawlessness, the fever of treating citizens like enemies and treating enemies like citizens. There is glimmer of hope in the work that has already been done. The summer fights over health care produced a discharge petition with 4 Republicans signing on. That led to a House vote with 17 Republicans joining Democrats. The War Powers Resolution passed the Senate with Republican support because the pressure from the American people forced them to act. The January 6th plaque was approved unanimously in the Senate because constituents demanded it. Every time something crazy happens, people pull out the ledger and ask the question, is this making me safer? Is this making the cost of living go down? Is this giving me peace and moral clarity with this administration at the helm? And the answer, consistently, is no. The moral reckoning that Congresswoman Kamlager-Dove calls for is the only thing that can save the country from what is happening. We have become so focused on personalities and polls and political strategy that we have forgotten how to talk about good and evil. But that is exactly what this moment requires. A man in the White House is turning law enforcement into paramilitary agents at the federal level and hostages within their own cities at the local level. Citizens are being murdered by federal agents with no accountability. Insurrectionists are being pardoned while victims are being blamed. This is not politics as usual. This is not normal partisan disagreement. This is a moral crisis that demands a moral response. Sheriff Bilal provided the template for that response in Philadelphia. Speak the truth directly. Draw the line clearly. Refuse to pretend that what is happening is acceptable. You come here with your masks and start harassing our people, you will be placed under arrest. You will be prosecuted. That is moral clarity. That is what law enforcement looks like when it remembers who it is supposed to serve. That is what leadership looks like when it refuses to be intimidated by federal power. And it is working. Homicides in Philadelphia are at their lowest level in 60 years. Communities are safer because local law enforcement is focused on protecting them rather than terrorizing them. That is the model. That is the proof that a different approach is possible. That is the evidence that the administration's lawlessness is a choice, not a necessity. Congresswoman Kamlager-Dove is right about what happens next. Keep organizing, keep applying pressure, keep reminding Republicans that they are vulnerable, that they know they are going to lose, that they can feel the anger of the American people rising. The Senate voted on the War Powers Resolution with Republican support because the pressure became unbearable. The House will eventually have to reckon with what is happening because their constituents are watching, and they are not going to forget. Every illegal action, every murder, every cover-up is being documented. The receipts are being kept, and at some point, the fever will break. The question is how many more Renee Goods have to die before it does? How many more citizens have to be murdered by federal agents with no consequences before the moral reckoning finally arrives? How many more communities have to be terrorized before the people who enabled this are held accountable? Sheriff Bilal has given her warning. Congresswoman Kamlager-Dove has given her call to action. The rest is up to us. Keep the pressure on. Keep the receipts. Keep demanding that the fever break. Because the alternative is a country where federal agents can murder citizens with impunity and a president will blame the victims. That is not America. That cannot become America. And the only people who can stop it are the people who refuse to accept it.